Now it can be said officially. A new phase of negotiations between the US and Iran has begun, and Donald Trump is already signaling the end of the war and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Today it became known that Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir, who has become a key mediator between the US and Iran, arrived in Tehran to deliver a message from Washington ahead of a new face-to-face meeting in the coming days. Trump stated that the war is already over and all that remains is to formalize all the agreements in a new deal with Iran, which should be ready in the near future. At the same time, American officials have publicly stated that the parties are already close to a framework agreement to end the war. But, odd as it may sound, the head of Israeli intelligence, David Barnea, stated that Israel, on the contrary, has made even greater efforts to overthrow the Iranian regime, despite the parallel efforts of the US and Tehran to reach a peace agreement. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the episode, and leave any comment you want. This is very important for promoting this episode on YouTube. And subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link is in the description of this video. So here's the news that shocked many people. The President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, announced the completion of the military operation against the Iranian regime. This was stated by Fox News journalist Maria Bartiromo, who interviewed Trump at the White House the day before. According to her, the US president, answering the question of whether the war in Iran was over, noted that it had indeed already ended. Let me quote Bartiromo here. "I just spoke with the president. He talked a lot about the economy, the war with Iran and NATO." I'll quote one of his phrases separately. "I said to him, 'You always talk about this war as if it's already in the past. Is it already over?' He replied, 'It's over.'" Although it later turned out that this was a clever trick by the journalist to draw attention to this interview, which of course was released in full later. And in the actual interview, Trump still didn't say that the operation in Iran was already over. And here's what he actually said, quote, "I believe that the war is already close to being over, in my opinion, very close to the end. If I just pulled everything out right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country, and we're not done yet. Let's see what happens." Nevertheless, negotiations between the two countries are moving into a new phase, and right now Pakistani officials are passing along wishes and conditions to both sides. For both sides to sign an agreement, the Pakistanis, let me remind you, are acting as mediators here. Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir, by the way, a favorite of both Donald Trump and Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who has become a key mediator between the US and Iran, arrived in Tehran today at the head of a high-level delegation. It's important to explain why this visit matters. The fact is that the Iranian regime is so frightened that it doesn't use messaging apps. So Munir's delegation personally delivered a message from Washington to Tehran. The delegation met with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and discussed issues related to the second round of negotiations, which is set to take place in the coming days. This meeting is taking place against the backdrop of broader diplomatic efforts to hold a second round of negotiations between the US and Iran, after the high-level meetings between the two countries over the weekend did not lead to any agreement. And yesterday, Donald Trump hinted at the possibility that something might happen in the next 2 days in Islamabad, where negotiations took place last week. I should note here that this is how he advised a journalist from the New York Post, a newspaper he reads regularly, to stay in Islamabad after all. He said, "Don't leave, don't fly back to the US because something is going to happen there in the next 2 days." In addition, a representative of the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs also confirmed today that Iran continues to exchange messages with the US through Pakistan. And against this backdrop, Axios reports that American and Iranian negotiators have made progress in the talks, moving closer to a framework agreement to end the war. And this is important because the ceasefire expires on April 21 and Trump's team has stated that they do not want to extend it. In addition, an American official told Axios that President Trump's negotiating team includes Vice President J.D. Vance, White House Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff, and Senior Advisor Jared Kushner. On Tuesday and Wednesday, they continued to hold calls and exchange draft proposals with the Iranians through Pakistani intermediaries. In Pakistan, it was hinted that a new round of direct in-person negotiations between the US and Iran is likely to take place within the next 3 days. J.D. Vance, who led the initial negotiations in Pakistan last week, said, quote, "I think the people we're dealing with now would like to make a deal. I'm very pleased with how things are going." But here I have to make a remark right away. The framework agreement they're working toward now is not the end of the war yet. If a framework agreement is reached, a ceasefire will be required later to extend time for negotiations on the details of a comprehensive deal. That is, work is now underway on a preliminary agreement outlining the general features of the future deal. A framework agreement is, like a picture painted in broad strokes, and the details are worked out later. Well, obviously there are no guarantees right now. Well, for example, Trump's naval blockade, which blocked the export of Iranian oil, and the deepening economic crisis in the country are increasing pressure on Tehran to reach an agreement. At the same time, the US is deploying additional forces to the Middle East, and about 6,000 troops are being sent to the region. On board the aircraft carrier USS George Bush and its accompanying ships, and about 4,000 more service members from the Boxer amphibious group, including the 11th US Marine Expeditionary Unit. All of them are expected to arrive in the region very soon. On the other hand, Iran is already threatening to block the Red Sea, specifically the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait, if the US continues the blockade of the Hormuz Strait. That's why both sides are interested in reaching at least a framework agreement. After all, it's obvious that if Iran can't export oil through the Hormuz Strait and runs out of onshore storage capacity, it will have to stop oil production. This could potentially lead to wells being taken out of operation and cause long-term economic damage. Iran will simply run out of money. On the other hand, if Iran blocks the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea, it will hit Saudi Arabia, which has only recently restored its pre-war oil export volumes precisely by bypassing the Strait of Hormuz from the other side of the Arabian Peninsula. But suddenly, everyone was stunned by the head of Israeli intelligence, David Bourne, who directly stated that Mossad will continue to make even greater efforts to overthrow the Iranian regime, despite the parallel efforts of the US and Tehran to reach a peace agreement. He stated that Israel is not going to stop there and is expecting a complete change of government in Iran. Here is his quote, "Our mission is not yet complete. Our commitment will only be fulfilled once this extremist regime is replaced. This regime which seeks our destruction must disappear from the world." I'll put an ellipsis here, but friends, I want to recommend a YouTube episode that I would suggest Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, watch. It's called "He Should Stop Pretending to Be Normal." This is an episode by my favorite psychologist. I've been recommending this YouTube channel to you for a long time. The link will be in the description. Go check it out. There's a great analysis there of how all of us behave. We're always trying to fit in with those around us, trying to suppress some of our character traits and more, and in doing so, we end up suffocating ourselves a little bit. That's why I recommend watching this episode. I'll leave the link in the description and in a pinned comment under this video. And friends, be sure to check it out, watch, and subscribe. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.